Welcome to our channel Scary Sagas, where we bring you the most amazing true horror stories. I was a college student working part-time at a Subway restaurant in a quaint town in Indiana. The year was 2019 to 2020, and winter had unleashed a devastating snowfall upon us. The town was blanketed in a thick layer of snow, creating an atmosphere of both enchantment and trepidation. Little did I know that this snowy landscape would soon become the backdrop for a series of spine-chilling events that would forever change my perspective on the supernatural. Growing up, my family had always been plagued by paranormal encounters, and these otherworldly experiences continued to follow me into adulthood. Our ancestral curse, it seemed, was a gift and a burden passed down through the generations. Armed with the knowledge of how energy can be transported, retained, and replayed, I thought I was prepared for anything that came my way. One fateful night, as the snow fell relentlessly outside, I found myself working the closing shift with my colleague, Ryan. Our business owner, a notorious cheapskate, refused to let us shut early, forcing us to brave the treacherous roads. Little did we know that this decision would lead us into a world of inexplicable phenomena. As the night wore on, the Subway restaurant fell into an eerie silence, broken only by the hum of machinery and the distant sound of the snowstorm raging outside. It was in this almost deathly quiet that a voice pierced through the air, emanating from the front of the establishment. Our hearts skipped a beat as we exchanged puzzled glances, trying to decipher the words spoken. The voice sounded like a typical customer seeking assistance, but there was something off about it, something inexplicable. Curiosity mingled with a sense of foreboding as I approached the lobby. What I saw sent a chill down my spine. The area was deserted, shrouded in a curtain of snow so thick that it obscured the outside world. There were no cars, no signs of life, just an eerie emptiness that hung in the air like a ghostly presence. As I returned to Ryan, my mind racing with questions, he wore a skeptical expression, dismissing the encounter as a mere coincidence. But little did he know that this was just the beginning of a night filled with inexplicable and terrifying occurrences. The doorbell rang once again, jolting us from our thoughts. This time, it chimed, indicating that the back door had been opened. But who could it be? Managers and the owner were not expected, given the treacherous snowstorm. Tentatively, we ventured towards the rear, only to be greeted by an unsettling emptiness. No one was there. Confusion and unease settled upon us like a heavy fog. As we turned to make our way back, a loud thud reverberated through the restaurant as if a mop had been violently slammed to the floor. Our hearts raced as we rushed back to the kitchen, expecting to find evidence of the fallen mop. But to our astonishment, the mop stood upright, defying the laws of gravity and reason. It was as if an unseen force toyed with our senses, leaving us bewildered and filled with a growing sense of dread. With each passing moment, the tension escalated. Ryan's skepticism began to crumble as fear consumed him. He clung to me, seeking solace and protection, his wide eyes reflecting a mix of terror and disbelief. "Did you hear that?" he whispered urgently, his voice trembling with fear. I shook my head, denying any knowledge of what he had heard. But his words sent a chill down my spine. Something had screamed in his ear, an otherworldly voice that defied explanation. With trepidation, I led Ryan back to the lobby, hoping that staying there would offer some semblance of safety. But the voices persisted, faint whispers that seemed to emanate from the depths of the restaurant. We strained our ears, trying to decipher the words, but they eluded our grasp, leaving us with a sense of both excitement and frustration. Hours passed in a state of heightened awareness, our senses attuned to every creak and whisper. Time became a blur as we navigated the thin line between reality and the supernatural. We completed our tasks with a mixture of fear and anticipation, our minds consumed by the enigma that enveloped us. As morning broke and we finally shut down the restaurant, a mixture of relief and lingering unease washed over us. We couldn't fully comprehend what had transpired that night. Had the powerful snowstorm awakened dormant spirits from the nearby haunted bridge of Indiana? Or had the isolation and solitude of the blizzard played tricks on our minds, blurring the boundaries between reality and the paranormal? To this day, the true nature of those haunting encounters remains a mystery. Ryan, still clinging to his skepticism, searches for rational explanations, refusing to fully acknowledge the unexplainable. But for me, that night opened a door to a world beyond our comprehension, a world teeming with excitement, curiosity, and an insatiable desire to uncover the truth. It was early January, perhaps in the heart of winter. After Christmas, we frequently see significant snowfall at this time of year. I made the decision to take a trip and book a cabin for the weekend with two of my relatives. We thought it would be wonderful to take a getaway to a family member's cottage in the mountains. On a Thursday night, we would travel there, and on a Sunday morning, we would return. We had received warnings from the cabin's owners about unusual occurrences and sightings there. They stated that their small boy had been pointing outdoors while standing by the kitchen window. He explained to his mother that a woman was standing outside when she asked him what was wrong. No one had ever been there. Despite our reservations, the three of us made the decision to travel and enjoy ourselves. We didn't see an issue if the worst that might happen was a lady outdoors. Winter storm was predicted to arrive, but we all had four-wheel cars and were adept at navigating the snow. We determined that nothing would stop us from spending the weekend relaxing at the cabin. We quickly left with all of our belongings packed and enough food and beverages for the entire weekend. We finally arrived at the cottage. Snow was starting to flurry, but we reasoned that this would only make us cozier in the cabin. We recalled the hot cocoa and coffee, and there was wood for the fireplace. As settling up, we started to unwind by the fire we had made. The snow outside was already an inch deep, and the wind had started to howl. We took it easy for a while since we thought the weather couldn't get any worse. We were chatting, laughing, and enjoying ourselves. After some time, we all made the decision to turn it in. I had not slept so well in a long time until that particular night. Whatever it is that makes sleeping in a cabin makes you feel warm, I have no idea. I recall smelling a delicious brunch aroma as I woke up that morning. The fragrance of sausage filled the entire house while the eggs and bacon were frying. I turned over and made the decision to get a cup of coffee and ask the person who was cooking if they needed any assistance. My cousin, who we'll name Joe, approached me in the hallway. Joe said, "Wow, I need to eat. That kitchen has a wonderful aroma." But nobody was present when we went into the kitchen. There were no fried sausage, bacon, or eggs. The pans appeared to have not even been touched, and the burner was off. We dismissed this as one of those strange things that frequently occur at the cottage. "Well," Joe added, "I sure wish we hadn't just imagined that breakfast if there is a ghost here." We laughed and promised to keep our silence over what had transpired. In any case, people would consider us nuts. We heard a person enter the room at about that time. We referred to him as Charles. The weather outside is becoming blizzard-like. I think it would be a fantastic idea if we tried to rev these vehicles up. We will need to leave sooner if it becomes significantly worse. And a dead battery would not be ideal, remarked Charles. We had all arrived in 3 trucks at this point, all of which had 4-wheel drive and had no problems. We 3 took our keys and went outside to start the vehicles. Despite rattling, my ignition will not turn on. Then there was stillness, followed by the sound of the other 2 trucks stumbling to get going. After inspecting each truck, it appeared that none of them had any issues. We all walked back inside, irritated and unsure of what on earth we were going to do. We decided to use the phone in the cabin to call a friend to see if they could come up and give us a lift. There was no dial tone and no noise on the phone line. Joe questioned, "What are we going to do?" "Well," I said, "letting this fire go out is the last thing we want to do." Charles made the decision to walk outside to the woodshed and bring in lots more firewood before we looked into having a meal. We had no choice but to wait it out till we could work something out because we were too far from town to walk back. Charles returned a little while later, calling out, "Hey, possibly, we have neighbors." I inquired as to what he was talking about because I had never heard of anyone residing nearby. Charles believes he heard a chuckle when he was outside at the woodshed. He turned around and noticed a figure moving through the snow. He stated it was a lady when she turned around. He claimed that she turned, crossed in front of the woodshed, and then vanished. To find out where she could have gone, we all stepped outside. There were no traces when we arrived at the woodshed where Charles claimed to have seen her. Now the snow was approximately 5 inches thick at this time, and I have never seen anything walk through that much snow without leaving a footprint. Charles was ridiculed by all of us as insane, but I think we were all 3 secretly wondering what the heck was going on. We all went to bed hoping that the next day would bring better fortune once the remainder of that day had passed. The following morning, I woke up to the sound of fat frying and the same wonderful aroma emanating from the kitchen. Once more, I would discover the kitchen to be vacant and would just make myself a cup of coffee. Around that moment, Joe and Charles entered the kitchen and retrieved a cup of coffee for them. Joe stated, "Truck still won't crank." For some time, we all gathered in the living room around the fireplace debating our options. We determined that if Sunday arrived and we hadn't returned home, someone would seek us because it wasn't like we had no one who knew we were there. Just like the first day, this one came to an end at night. We were all 3 still seated in the living room when what appeared to be footsteps from the kitchen were heard by all 3 of us. I rose to my feet and headed into the kitchen. Nobody was there, and it was vacant. When we didn't arrive home the next day, we all went to bed in the hopes that someone would arrive later. My eyes sprung awake on Sunday morning. Once more, I was annoyed by the unpleasant scent of breakfast, which I knew would not be present. Charles and Joe joined me as soon as I entered the kitchen. "The question is, what do you think?" replied Joe. "Try the trucks." We all stepped outdoors with a simple nod from me. At this point, I didn't even hope the car would start when I turned the key in the ignition. My truck started and the engine rumbled. I could also hear the other 2 trucks turning. We 3 exchanged astonished glances with one another. We had been gone for 2 days when all 3 trucks started to run at once. Not even the lights were out. We sprinted into the cabin, grabbed everything, and threw everything into the vehicles in any old order. We simply wanted to go right now. I was concentrating on loading when Charles said, "Look, at the window." I raised an eyebrow and gaped. A woman was staring out the kitchen window at us. She appeared to be wearing a nightgown and had long brown hair. She seemed like she was waving at us and was incredibly attractive. We all exchanged quiet glances. It just needed that. After we had completed loading, we all got into our vehicles and began to drive down the mountain without turning around. We still don't know what occurred. Why did 3 trucks suddenly stop running before we were supposed to depart on Sunday, and all 3 started right up? And whatever she was, the lady, we've explained what occurred to everyone. Some people think we are real, while others just think we made up a fantastic campfire tale. The proprietors nodded in agreement when we mentioned the woman and indicated that she frequents the location. The cabin is gone as of right now. I've heard that it was eventually burnt after being sold. I'm also unsure of what remains on the land in terms of that. Do things still exist after location have disappeared? It was the middle of March, and an unforgiving snowstorm had descended upon the East Coast. Despite the treacherous weather, my father and I had a tradition of taking turns walking our beloved dog in the nearby park, particularly through its dense, forested area. On this particular night, it was my father's turn, and he decided to venture out with our faithful companion, unaware of the spine-chilling events that lay ahead. To give you some context, our residence was nestled in a rural suburb of an American city, a tranquil and peaceful setting, or so we thought. Now, my father is not a man to be trifled with, standing tall and imposing, instilling both respect and fear in those who encounter him. And deterred by the snowstorm, my father ventured into the remote region of the park, knowing that our dog loved the snow and relished these walks. As he arrived at the parking area, a peculiar sight caught his attention: a man rocking back and forth against a tree at the edge of the lot. Initially dismissing it as a fellow dog walker taking a breather, my father paid little mind to the strange occurrence. For a while, nothing out of the ordinary happened as my father and our dog continued along their usual route. However, as they pressed on, a figure cloaked in a hood appeared in the middle of the path. Choosing to pass the mysterious stranger, my father proceeded on his way, his canine companion lying down with her head low and her tail tucked between her legs, a sign of unease. As he glanced back, expecting to see the hooded figure receding into the distance, he was met with a disconcerting sight: nothing at all. It defied all logic. There was nowhere for the man to have disappeared, and even with the howling wind, any movement would have surely generated noise. The path was lined with only sparse brush and dead shrubs, amplifying the sound of any sudden movement. Still, my father brushed off the oddity and continued his walk, a sense of unease creeping over him. Suddenly, the same hooded figure reappeared, this time approaching from behind. Before my father could react, our dog, sensing the imminent threat, swiftly positioned herself between my father and the hooded stranger. She transformed into a fierce protector, her body swelling with primal energy as she let out deep, menacing snarls. At that moment, she resembled a majestic wolf, ready to defend her pack against any threat, no matter how formidable. The stranger came to an abrupt halt, extending his arms in what can only be described as a pose, a peculiar stance reminiscent of non-playable characters in video games when they first appear. My father, now fully aware of the potential danger, stopped in his tracks, allowing the man a moment to gaze at him. It became evident that the stranger, faced with a formidable adversary and an undaunted canine companion, had no intention of following through with any harmful intentions. As my father contemplated the bizarre encounter, He realized the hooded figure had positioned himself exactly where my father would have passed him on the way back to the car. Yet, when he reached that spot, the man had vanished into thin air, leaving no trace behind. My father, in search of answers, scoured the surroundings for any signs of the enigmatic figure, only to be met with uncertainty. There were no footprints or any evidence to suggest that the man had ever been there. Even amid the blizzard, both my father's and our dog's prints remained visible, and a fallen tree nearby served as a marker for that precise location. It was as if the stranger had never existed. The remainder of the walk wasn't eventful, but the weight of the encounter lingered in my father's mind. As I recount this story to you, it is only a few hours since the incident took place, and the authenticity of my father's account is undeniable. He does not bluff, and I can see the anger etched upon his face, knowing that the person or entity that approached him may have had sinister intentions. Yet, I cannot help but feel a profound sense of gratitude that it was my father who experienced this harrowing encounter and not myself on that fateful trek. They seem to like that these stories will leave you with more questions than answers. They are a reminder that sometimes the truth is much darker and more mysterious than we ever imagined. Join us next time on Scary Sagas for other spine-chilling true stories.